here to talk about an enabling business environment. Now, my background is in the NGO sector, and then most recently with JN in the private sector. So it's interesting that I've had this kind of meeting of the two worlds. I am a sort of social practitioner, that's how I identify myself, but I work for an organization that operates off of commercial purposes. And what it has done is it has allowed me to see the two different worlds that we operate in and how they can really come together and work in a way that is beneficial to each of them, and that is beneficial to this country, that's beneficial to this world, that's beneficial to my children, that's beneficial to my grandchildren, that's beneficial to my soul, you know. But I kind of wanted to give you a sense of why I've moved into the world of social enterprises, and it's because of the marrying of the two worlds that I now know. So when we talk about enabling, again, this one, and I want to change the definition of enable. This is give someone the authority or means to do something. But in the social enterprise world, what we're faced with is we're going to have to take the authority and create the means to enable us to do what we want to do. Nobody's just going to kind of open the door and say, what do you want? Sure, come right on in. We're going to have to knock. We're going to have to knock some more. We're going to have to give the reasons why we should be coming in. We're going to have to put our foot in the door so you can't close it. That's what we are going to have to do. There's nobody else who's going to do it for us. So when we talk about social enterprises and how we create an enabling environment, it's important to look at the characteristics that make social enterprises different and how these differences are not currently recognized in a way that allows social enterprises to grow and thrive. We've already discussed in great detail the role of social enterprises, how economies around the world are growing in large part to the social economy, due in large part to the social economy, how targeted services, relevant legislation, and root cause are all essential if we are going to put a dent in the unsustainable practices that are threatening our ability to thrive. Much of the current dialogue at the global level is about the growing inequalities in wealth distribution and how, with what we know about societies, how we've allowed to get ourselves to where we are today. How do we reverse the damage that has been done over the last 30, 50, or 100 years? Dr. Knife's presentation yesterday gave us a very clear picture of the landscape in Jamaica and spoke about the social sector growth outpacing traditional enterprises. He spoke about the opportunities that exist in Jamaica for the social economy, and he asked that we ensure that the social economy players are all positioned to take advantage of these opportunities when they present themselves so that we can make this dent in development we keep talking about. So the research, Jamaican National Foundation and USAID, as you know, have partnered to do SEBI, and one of the first things that SEBI did was a baseline study. The Office of Social Entrepreneurship at UE, through Dr. Knife, conducted the study. And out of the study, out of the research, these are kind of the key findings in terms of the enabling environment that we're talking about for social enterprises. So this seems like such a simple thing. You know, what is a social enterprise? You know, we're here having this massive summit. We've been doing social enterprises for years. And now we're going to ask the question, what is a social enterprise? We all have ideas about what a social enterprise is. One definition that's out of Australia defines social enterprises as organizations that are led by economic, social, cultural, or environmental mission consistent with a public or community benefit, one that trades to fulfill their mission where 50% or more of their income is derived from trade. We had that question earlier. And where they reinvest the majority of their surplus in the fulfillment of their mission. My question is, if it's the majority, what happens to the rest? But we can find that out. I passed around a piece of paper earlier to a few people to ask them what their definition of social enterprise is. One came up with apply commercial strategies to maximize the improvement of what we can make to the well-being of others. Another one was a social enterprise is a community of people working together for the growth of individuals involved socially and economically. Another one is an organization selling products and services for the sole purpose of generating income to achieve their social mission. And another one is a business that is sustainable while being a powerful vehicle of social change. None of these definitions are incorrect at all. What we need to do is we need to find that definition for Jamaica so that wherever we go in the world, whoever we're talking to, we're using the same language. The next one is social enterprises must become part of the development planning. Yesterday, Claire spoke about the manifest that they produce every election and about how they were able to ensure that social enterprises were considered in every part of government. But the social enterprise sector drove that. Nobody asked for it. I'm sure she didn't have a government minister knocking on her door saying, Claire, we thought it'd be great fun if you submitted a manifesto that we would then have to go and deliver and live up to. It was something that they drove, and we're going to have to do the exact same things. But we believe that social enterprises and the social economy, we're great innovators and we can easily do this. We can come up with what needs to happen across the board and we can write that manifesto for ourselves. And when I say our and we, I'm talking about all of us here. I'm not talking about like GN and SEBI and a couple others. I'm talking about everybody. SEs must become part of local government structures. This was another recommendation out of the report. There must be joint approaches to governance and collaboration. And then we just had the presentation on social return and how we show social value. There's one thing in here before all that says research. Didn't get on there. So research and documentation has to take place. If we're going to make demands for inclusion in the market, then we must start to put the focus on actual gaps, opportunities, and the right frameworks. We must start showing our social value. Dr. Knife said yesterday that in one academic year, his students had contributed $75 million to the national economy by doing business plans for NGOs and charities. He was able to put that in. So when he goes to the government and to the dean and the vice chancellor and says, I need more budget, I need $1 million more, and he's created $75 million of value. I mean, it would be political suicide to tell him no, right? Becca Stevens from Thistle Farms, who was here yesterday, showed that she had saved the city of Nashville $750,000 US in 1 year. So again, when she goes to them and she says, listen, I need $100,000, that's nothing, because if they didn't give it to her, they'd be spending $750,000. That's where we need to get. That's where all of us need to get. I'm not there. I can't show the social value of all the work that the JN Foundation does. But I have to start. We've started. We can show some of the value, but we need to get to that place where we can show the value for everything that we do. Oh, wrong way. Okay, back on track. We need to look at the registration status of social organizations. The Charities Act was passed 1 year ago. Has it helped you? Has it hindered you? Has it strengthened your ability to deliver what it is you're supposed to deliver? No. Are you better able to leverage resources, access finance, get public contracts? I'm hearing lots of no's. This is not good. And we have to make sure. How do we ensure that the legislation surrounding social enterprises is one that drives the sector forward, not one that you have to battle through? Because that defeats the whole purpose. You can battle through now. You don't need any legislation. We're all battling through right now. So putting legislation in place that we still have to battle through is slightly pointless. We need to make sure that when we get the legislation, that it's something that propels us forward, naturally. So really what the research recommends, capacity development of social organizations, and I'll get into that a little later, and access to resources. Again, I'm going to cover that shortly. So really what the research recommends can be broken down into 3 key areas. If we start to look at what is essential for growth for social enterprises, it's important to differentiate based on the key players. But we must remember that the driving force behind the movement is always going to be all of us. Even if everybody else makes space, we're still going to have to drive it forward. So capacity. I break down into 2 areas. One is business readiness. And I start with a realignment of operational values. What we discovered when we started SEBI was that people went on a guilt trip, right? Trying to get our, at the time, NGOs and charities to recognize that they needed to have a mind shift, that they needed to go from being kind of focused on just the mission to becoming profit-driven, was something that they had a difficult time coming to grips with. It was something that they felt they were betraying the cause by going to that side, right? Because, you know, money-making things are evil. They've destroyed the world. They're why we're all where we are today, right? Right. It's not making money that's done that. It's how we've made the money, who's been making the money, and how they've been utilizing the money. So that was the first thing that we recognized. Then we also have the issue with telling the story, and we spoke about this in detail yesterday. Becca, who presented from Thistle Farms, spoke about the Love Heals brand. And the products that she sold were secondary to the story. In fact, the products were really there just to package the story. It was irrelevant. They were really irrelevant. The candles and the little oils and all these things, that was just packaging for the story. It was a story she was selling. And we're not very good at selling the stories. We're good at selling them to the newspapers and the news, but we're not good at selling them to consumers, the right stories that people want to take home. We sell stories that nobody wants. And we have to change that and start telling stories that people want to buy. And then we have business planning and incubation. And this is good old, you know, nuts and bolts. How do you start a business? How do you grow a business? How do you get financing? How do you market? You know, how do you get the right accountant? How do you attract the correct people? Alpha Boys was here on Monday, and they have a radio channel, a radio station. Now, how do I have a very good friend who is the marketing director of one of Jamaica's leading radio stations, right? And he has brought in a lot of money. It's a great radio station. They make a huge amount of money. How do I get him to leave his job over there and decide he's going to come and become the marketing director for Alpha Boys Radio and drive that? That's something that we have to look at, that for the enabling environment, we have to attract the best of the best. We then have to look at the people that we serve and how we train them up. The same thing Claire spoke about, is that you have people in your organization that can do basic things, and over time, you train them up. So something like 8 of her 10 managers were her beneficiaries. No, that's Becca. Sorry. That Becca said 8 of her 10 managers were young women who had gone through her program. And obviously, we want that. We want our beneficiaries to be able to become the CEOs of the organizations. But there's a process. And let's make sure that at each step of the development of your organization, you have the right people in the correct post. And then we look at the network. Here we look at best practice and knowledge sharing. This is where you'll get your encouragement, your support, your inspiration, and your know-how. I've been writing things down for the last 2 days that I never knew, I never considered, had never crossed my mind. And these are now things that are going to be coming into the work that we're doing. We discovered Becca at Thistle Farms when we went on a study tour in Nashville last year. We discovered SE UK when we're doing research and we're looking at what's happening out there. We're looking and seeing who's doing what. That's how you discover what's possible for yourselves. And then we get down to financing. So I don't really like this area. I don't like talking about money. I don't like asking for money. I don't like owing money. I think that making money is much more liberating. But as the saying goes, you've got to spend money to make money. So how do we get our social enterprises from here to there? How do we get them from needing money in order to make money to the point of making money? So there are lots of options. There's grants. We know that. That's probably what we're most familiar with in Jamaica. That's probably what we're more comfortable with. There's always going to be, we've heard this a number of times over the last 2 days, there's always going to be space for grants. It's always going to be necessary for social enterprises to be able to access grants. Because there are always going to be things that you're going to have to try. There are going to be startups that you want to do that your regular income can't support. Go and get a grant to do it. This is, Peter spoke about scaling out. Grants allow you to start doing that kind of work. So we're not going to start dissing grants. Grants are hugely important to social enterprises. But what we're talking about is mixed models. We're talking about impact investing and knowing that corporations and organizations out there, individuals, want to get involved in impact investing. And you have to make sure that you have the right products, that you have the right returns. whether they be financial or social returns, we have to make sure that our returns are appealing to impact investors. Then there's loans. I don't really like loans, but every so often we have to take a loan. But we can have discussions, should there be mixed rates of interest? If you have to take a loan, should some of the loan be, market rate interest, but then we ask banks to start providing below market rates? Is it a mixed model that we want to try and get mixed sources? We're going to take some grants, we're going to take some loans, we're going to take sort of more developmental loans versus commercial loans. I think that this idea that there's one road in one direction, we have to get rid of that myth. There's so many different things that we can do in so many different directions at the same time, and I think that we have to look at those models more. And then peer sourcing. I know nobody takes me on with this, and for some reason, our social enterprises in Jamaica are not making the most of this. But if our providers are not ready to start giving you all different kinds of financial products, then go to investors and lenders who are ready. And those investors and those lenders you can find globally via crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, peer-to-peer lending, and there's grants, there's lending, there's equity, there's all kinds of opportunities. And especially for social enterprises run by young people, this is a world that you guys should understand quite naturally. And I think that whilst we feel we have limitations here because there's a very specific model in Jamaica, I'm saying go outside of Jamaica. If we're not ready here, let's go and find who is. And then what else is possible? There was a nice, I didn't know this was possible, but yesterday Peter made reference to there's this fund that's available because what they did is they took dormant bank accounts where somebody hadn't touched their account in 30 years, and the government said, okay, well, you guys take it, and they were able to use that money. But if the people came back and said after, we want our money back, they got their money. But here was all this money that was available. What could we do with dormant accounts? Could we use the interest? Could it be mandated that social enterprises have access to the interest off of dormant accounts, and that propels the social enterprise sector forward? So I think there are lots of possibilities for us. And then we have to talk about the market space. Space needs to be created there. And in terms of accessing this space, we have to look at who's responsible for formalizing this. And again, I think it's our responsibility in the social economy to carve out this space. The key players, we're going to look at the government. They need to be involved in awareness raising. Obviously, the bisocial, I love the Social Value Act. I think it is an extraordinary, beyond groundbreaking, almost revolutionary piece of legislation, because it understands, to me that's the first piece of legislation that I've ever heard of, that understands all of humanity and understands how you build societies, how you grow societies, how you make societies thrive in a way that will benefit my great-grandchildren. And before this piece of legislation, I'd never seen anything that had been developed that would ensure that my great-grandchildren would have a wonderful world to live in. In fact, most of what I'd seen had me wondering if, we'd all, if the world would still be here when I had great-grandchildren. And I think that it's something that sees the big picture, and the government responsible for that and making that space, and we want our government to do that. They've just done the MSME policy that was just passed. They created space for the MSME sector. And we want space created for the social enterprise sector. We want preferential treatment. We want you to carve out 5% to begin with, and then as the social enterprise sector grows, maybe 10%. And as we grow, maybe a little more. As we prove ourselves, as we show that we're able to deliver what you need, when you need it, at the right quality, at the right price, in the right volume, consistently. But again, all the language that we're using is language to do with business and markets. We're not using language to do with, feel good. And when we're talking with the government, we have to be down to the nuts and bolts. But again, remember, the story is how you package everything. Then we look at integration. I just mentioned the Social Value Act, and also the government can support through mechanisms of direct and indirect government intervention in the market, such as wage subsidies to support the employment of target groups, such as ex-offenders or people with disabilities. They can give us tax advantages, regulated prices, quotas, preferential treatment, and more. I think all this is possible. And then this one word that people don't like, oversight. We really don't like oversight. We don't want to know that there's somebody watching us and dictating how things should happen and kind of regulating. But then where's our credibility? If we don't have some sort of oversight, we're not credible. We're not transparent. And that's going to be necessary. What we can dictate is, we can all determine what that oversight looks like. Nobody has to say to us in the social economy, this is what you have to do. We're going to decide what works for us. We're going to decide the kind of oversight. And if we get it right, then we'll do well because our consumers and legislation and everything will support that. If we do it wrong, then we haven't gained that credibility. Nobody's buying anything that we're selling. Nobody's giving us the money to do it. Nobody's creating that space. But again, these are not things that happen to us. This is what we do to create what we need. So that's the government. Then we look at private sector. We talk about supply chains. We want them to buy social enterprise goods and services, obviously. And remember that the work that we all do, are great marketing tools for private sector. They don't need to come up with a campaign if they're supporting and buying from one of the social enterprises. Their marketing and advertising is the outputs that you are delivering. That's what they're talking about. We need to ensure, however, as I said, that we can deliver and supply at the right volumes, at the best quality, at competitive prices, and consistently. Then we look at outsourcing. So this one I find very interesting, and this should have been also in the government section. But outsourcing services such as, let's say that you're living in you're serving in an inner city community that has very high unemployment, very low educational levels of attainment. What do? How do you really help that community? Well, you might go to a big private sector company and say, we want to deliver janitorial services or landscaping services. And they commission you to do that. Provide steady income for the group and allows time for you to then train that group and train individuals of that group so they can then become the supervisors and the managers and the IT specialists, and they work in the accounts department. And then once you've kind of trained this kind of very large group, you have a steady source of income, then you scale out, as Peter said, and you go and do something else that maybe is elevated a bit, that's maybe a little more specialized, so that you have, in essence, you're creating opportunities within your community for people who have no education, for people who are now more educated, better trained, but we have to have this stepped approach. And we have to recognize that we have to have the reputation with private sector before they're going to give us the big technical contract. We're going to have to show a track record first. So let's start somewhere that we can deliver well. Let's use that to fund what we're doing, to finance the work that we're doing, and then let's scale out. And then startups. So startups is something that I'm a huge believer in. And this is where you let the private sector become a partner for the startup. So let's say you've gone to private sector and they have a need. And no one to fill it. Well, let them help you set up the enterprise for your social enterprise. And that way you can get resourcing, you can get financial, technical resourcing, capacity building, and a ready market. And that way you're innovating in every space. So they're really kind of helping you from the get-go. But you're then providing a service for them, you're meeting a need, you have a market. And then we're looking at also private sector investments. That relates to the startup, and it's really where their shared value is what they're going to be looking at. Private sector in Jamaica is always being asked for donations and sponsorship, and I believe that they want legacy. I want to give you a little example about a project that we did at Jamaica National. In 2007, JN developed and launched the Source Community Resource Center. I know you've heard about it all over the place. We did the first one in Augustown. And due to the social enterprise model, we gave up all involvement in that center after 4 years of operation. We handed it over to UWI Township. Well, it's year 8. The Source in Augustown is thriving. There are 4 more centers island-wide, none of which we have any financial commitment for anymore. But they're still our centers. We report on them daily. We still say our source centers, our source centers. There is not one single donation that I have done that has given us that kind of coverage and goodwill 8 years later. And that's what the social enterprise model allows, so that instead of going to a corporate and saying, we need a donation for operating expenditure, and after 3 years you collapse, tell them, help us set up a social enterprise. You can be reporting on this in 15 years' time. And I think that's really important. And then we're looking at consumers. We want consumers to be aware of what we're doing. We want them to advocate for what we're doing. We want them to spread the word. We want them to make it trendy and cool. We want the right people wearing our products. We want the right people drinking our healthy juice. And we want them to start helping us also spread the word. We want buy-in. We want them to buy in, to become volunteers, to share their skills and knowledge. We want them to invest. This is socially, economically, emotionally, every kind of way we want their investment. As I mentioned, we want them to advocate. And obviously, we want them to buy social. So what next? Well, we feel there are a number of things that need to happen after this summit. And much of the findings of this summit and the research which you will help us conduct must lead to certain steps. At this point, these are the things that I would recommend based on the work we've been doing and based on what's been coming out of the summit. But when we're doing the Q&A, please feel free to contribute, to add, to suggest deletion. This is really a process that involves all of us. The first is define social enterprises. We have got to come up with a definition that works for us in Jamaica. And that is that's the definition that we use when we go to government, when we go to donors, when we go to the private sector, wherever we go, that's our definition. We must be able to identify social enterprises. What good is it if you're a social enterprise and nobody has a clue? So let's look at this.
You are a good person. You spend time with your family. You work out at the gym.
Come on, push.
You conserve water while showering. You like nice clothes. You give to charity. You recycle. You drive a Prius, but you use your bike when you can. You enjoy the occasional distraction at work. And you always send a card on Mother's Day. Always. But there's a part of you that tells yourself that you're not so good, that you could be doing more, that the world is falling apart at the seams and all you've been doing is yoga. One day you see that the rainforest is being destroyed at a staggering rate of 32 million acres a year. That's the equivalent of one football field every 78 seconds. You feel bad, angry, guilty. You've been apathetic for too long. You want to do something about it. You must do something about it. Well, this is what you're not going to do.
I quit!
You're not going to quit your job, leave your family, get on the next flight to Nicaragua, take a bus to the edge of the jungle, then hoof it across rivers, lakes, and streams on a quest to the very heart of the rainforest.
Take me to the heart of the rainforest.
You're getting closer. You're almost there. You have arrived.
You're not going to ingratiate yourself with the local tribesmen, go to great lengths to earn their respect and trust.
No.
It is around now you realize you're living out the cliché gringo fantasy of becoming an honorary native and leading the resistant forces. But screw it. If they could do it, so can you.
I'm gonna save you! This guy comes over here, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna pull a zafting bats right through him, right over here.
You're not going to coordinate and occupy the rainforest movement, realize it's hopeless, summon the power of the gods, lead a revolution against the deforesters and their multinational employers in an apocalyptic, once-and-for-all battle to save humanity, only to awaken 2 days later in an El Salvadorian hospital with 2 toes missing on your left foot.
Siri, I wanna go home.
Hobble out of Central America, up through Mexico, across the Sierra Madre, where you break down, have your first cigarette in 4 years, accidentally start a wildfire, killing off the endangered species that once served as your occupational distraction, finally make it back home, only to find you've been replaced at work by a guy named TJ, and that things at home are not what they used to be. You're not going to do any of these things, but what you can do is follow the frog. Buying Rainforest Alliance certified products ensures the future of our rainforests, so that you don't have to do the things you shouldn't do anyway. Just follow the frog.
So what's the mark that we're going to have that's going to ensure the future of Jamaica? That's going to be really important for us. The next one is a working group. We have to come up with a working group that's going to drive this forward. As I said earlier, we're going to speak in the we and the us, not the you, the they, or the I. And what form is this working group going to take? Who's going to be part of this working group? What is the national body for social enterprises going to be? Who's going to sit on that national body? Who's going to drive that national body? Where is it going to live? Is it going to live in the state? Is it going to live private sector, third sector? We need that network, a hub for learning, sharing, and lobbying. Practitioners, academia, national planning bodies, investors, and others all need to be part of this network. But it also needs to become a space for trade, for growth opportunities, and much more. I spoke earlier about the research, and we need to do this to get the support and buy-in and show the social value that we all create. And what about an investment fund? A pot of money just for social enterprises? Again, it may not be grants, it may not be loans, it may be a mixture, it may be some grants, some loans, some equity, some kind of investment, but something that allows social enterprises to grow and something that we can all access as social enterprises. And I think with all the decisions that we're going to make in the coming days, months, and years, we must remember that we must stay autonomous. We must stay free from hidden, or sometimes not so hidden, agendas. We're not a lobby group for anyone. We're not here to get anybody into power. We're here for Jamaica. And the work that we do must always be seen to be for Jamaica first and foremost, before anything else. So what's the call to action after today? Well, you guys, we all need to register at sebijm.com, because currently this is where we house the information and the movement. It's going to change because this is a project being funded by JN Foundation and USAID. But we have to develop the next steps after that. But this is the first thing you're going to do. The second is you're going to sign up for the working group. I don't expect everybody to sign up, but I expect quite a few of us here today to offer ourselves to the working group or our organizations. You can offer your organization or yourself. We're going to complete the questionnaire. After today, you're going to get a questionnaire about the summit. And this is going to be a huge resource in terms of understanding what the needs are of the social enterprise sector. And then you're going to give feedback. The only way we're all going to know how we should move forward is if we're all giving feedback. And we don't want, in a few years' time, when legislation is passed and markets are created and investment funds are there, for some social enterprises to come and say, but y'all don't represent us. This is not what we wanted. Social enterprises by nature are inclusive, not exclusive. Our systems are one that are inclusive, not exclusive. We believe in consultation. So therefore, we must embody that model in developing this framework for the social economy. Thank you.